100 years ago, opportunity called homesteader families to Montana and to other Midwestern states and Western states. Endless horizons of open land promised rich harvests. Homestead Act promised a deed to the land. But every homesteading family knew that no matter what was promised, only diligent work could realize it. Leaving one job unfinished could jeopardize a year of work, and without it, any promise of opportunity. Like those pioneering families, many in America are today lured by the promise of opportunity on the global scale. Vast economic horizons beckon from Latin America to Southeast Asia. We see opportunity from the expanding middle classes of developing China and India to the resurgent developed economies in Europe. Yet today, as 100 years ago, the promise of opportunity means little if we don't work to realize it. Success tolerates no skipped steps or half measures. That was true in Montana's frontier, and that is true in our nation's economic agenda. Today, a crucial task remains unfinished on the trade agenda. It is a task that will reinforce the hard work that we have done in the past, and it is a task that will sow the seeds for future successes. Done thoroughly and thoughtfully, it can help us realize the opportunities we seek and those who have promised American workers, farmers, and ranchers. The task is the passage and implementation of a robust reform of the Trade Adjustment Assistance Program. We have the opportunity today to make sure that trade adjustment assistance matches the ambition and flexibility of our workers. We have the chance to reform the Trade Adjustment Assistance Program in a way that recognizes our workers' potential and anticipates their needs. And we have the obligation to reform TAA to enhance what works and to change what doesn't. Our task is to adopt and implement a Trade Adjustment Assistance Program that reflects the 21st century global economy. Let me be clear. This task and no other must be our nation's trade policy priority. Until we accomplish it, other issues on today's trade agenda must take the back seat. That includes congressional consideration of pending free trade agreements with Colombia, Korea, and Panama. I simply cannot support or consider moving these agreements in the Senate until we realize the goal of expanded and reauthorized trade adjustment assistance. Americans recognize the opportunities of the global economy, and they want to seize them. Americans know that 95% of the world's consumers live outside our borders, including growing consumer classes in Asia and Europe. They see that international trade is a growing part of our economy. They see that our exports to major global markets grew by more than 20% last year. And they see that export growth has been a rare bright spot in our economic picture. They understand that trade can enhance our comparative advantage and lower prices of consumer goods. Looking to the future, 40% of today's entrepreneurs expect a quarter of their customers to come from abroad. In Montana, 2 out of every 3 bushels of wheat harvested in our state are exported to Asia. Exports of Montana beef are critical to keeping ranches profitable. The promise of these global economic opportunities is undeniable. We must work to realize them. Yet to succeed, we can skip no task. We must use every tool. Success will come when every task is properly done at the proper time with all of our energy and creativity. For too long, this administration has used scarce resources in a singular pursuit of free trade agreements, casting aside other trade policy tools. Too often, these agreements have little commercial gain, but they add high political price. Robust policies abroad, like free trade agreements, must go hand in hand with vigorous and innovative economic policies at home. Trade policy is not just about economics. It is as much about the workers that drive our economy. Support for globalization and international trade today is at a low. One survey revealed that nearly half of Americans believe that free trade agreements hurt the United States, and 40% believe that global economy hurts their communities. Polls show that nearly 60% of Americans think that an increasingly global economy is bad for American jobs. Nearly two-thirds think trade hurts American workers. We can rebuild American support for trade only if we turn our trade policy away from this singular focus on trade agreements. We must concentrate not only on closing trade deals, but also in closing the gap between globalization's haves and have-nots. We must labor toward a trade policy that lowers trade barriers overseas, but we must also forge a policy that builds a broad consensus at home. We must seek certainty and fairness for our companies operating in foreign markets. We must also pursue certainty and fairness for workers at home. That is why, as chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, I believe that the first task before us this year must be comprehensive reform of trade adjustment assistance. For 4 decades, TAA has helped American workers caught up in the tides and cross-currents of globalization. As the wave of globalization gathers strength, trade adjustment assistance must have equal vigor. 4 major reforms, I believe, are indispensable. First, we must expand TAA to benefit service workers. Services comprise 80% of our economy. Our global services exports are second to none, but TAA is stuck in the manufacturing age. Trade adjustment assistance doesn't reflect today's economic realities. And that isn't just an anachronism, it's an embarrassment. Second, we must make it perfectly clear that TAA covers workers whose firms have offshore production to countries that are not free trade agreement partners. This ambiguity in current law is another remnant of the past, and it makes little sense. Last year, some of our fastest growing export markets were India, Brazil, Germany. We have free trade agreements with none of these countries. America's trade is not confined to a small group of FTA partner countries, so the benefit to workers under TA should not be confined that way either. Third, we must expand the health care tax credit. 6 years ago, when I was last chairman of the Finance Committee, I worked hard to include a health care tax credit in the program. That credit currently pays for 65% of health care premiums. That was a good start, but 6 years of experience tells us that we have to do more. The current health care tax credit requires unemployed workers to pay an even bigger share of their health insurance premium than when they had a job. It's clear why unemployed TAA-eligible workers have not made use of that tax credit. They can't afford it. Current law requires these unemployed workers to pay more for their health insurance than they did when they had a job. TAA must help workers to mitigate their health care costs. It should ease their transition to the next job. That's why we must expand the existing health care tax credit from 65 to 85%. That's not just good policy, it's the right thing to do. Fourth, we must increase the training funds available to workers. Current law caps this amount at $220 million a year. As a result, several states have run out of training funds mid-year. That shuts out TA workers eligible for long-term training. We need to double the current cap and reset it at $440 million. The best way to honor our workers' abilities is to offer them the opportunity to retool, retrain, and get back to work. Displaced workers don't want charity, but they do want a chance at a fresh start. Expanding retraining funds is the best way to invest in America's competitive workforce and give them that chance. Finally, we can make other improvements to the program. We can allow trade-affected communities to benefit from targeted assistance. We can also make the TA for firms and TA for farmers and fishermen programs more accessible and adaptable to today's market realities. And we can make wage insurance and training benefits designed in a way to complement each other rather than crowd each other out. Last summer, I introduced legislation with these TA reforms, and I plan to mark up the bill in the coming weeks. I propose these reforms and emphasize their preeminence not to slow our economic agenda, but to advance it. I was pleased to hear the President's willingness to work on trade adjustment assistance this year as part of the agenda he has set out in his State of the Union address. With the reform TA in place, we can then move on to other important issues on the trade agenda. But before Congress, as you know, before Congress are 3 pending free trade agreements. We also have an important opportunity to modernize our customs programs to ensure that our borders are safe from tainted or pirated goods. And with many of our preference programs expiring this year, we have a unique opportunity to examine their operation and propose a new path forward. When Congress passed the Homestead Act, they promised an opportunity that rewarded hard work. After Montana homesteaders toiled to cultivate the land and yield rich harvests, the Homestead Act granted them the deed to the land. The reward for their hard work in hand, these families expanded their farms and ranches, cultivating the next plot over the new horizon, and they moved on to other successes. I'm confident that once we finish our work for comprehensive free adjustment assistance reform, we too will be able to look at the next step, the new horizon, and other successes. I hope you will join me in this hard work, because I believe it is very, very important. It is vital to get TAA up and passed so that our country is much more involved in a positive way in embracing the benefits of free trade. Thank you very much.
Chairman Baucus has to run, but he said he'll take a couple of quick questions, so the floor is open.
Quick questions and quick answers.
Please identify yourself and make it quick.
Erica Nelson with Inside U.S. Trade. My first question is, how much direct contact has there been between you and the administration on their trade priorities and your trade priorities, and how to proceed with those? And secondly, how much would the backing of a strong TAA bill open the door for the administration's trade priority of passage of Colombia?
Well, frankly, I've been preoccupied with stimulus legislation this last couple of weeks, so I've not spent much time in the administration on trade policy. But I do believe very strongly that without TAA, it's first impossible to get these these free trade agreements passed. And as I said in my remarks, frankly, I'm not going to bring them up until I see very significant progress in trade adjustment assistance. There are many senators who have told me that they're not even going to consider voting for the FTAs until they see trade adjustment assistance, and I think they're right. I think if these trade agreements were brought up first before trade adjustment assistance, that probably trade adjustment assistance would languish and fall behind. It's critical, and I don't think they pass. I don't think they pass. You need something to show to members of Congress, and especially people at home, that Congress gets it. That Congress understands we got to do something for the people.
Senator Staff is saying he's got to run. I leave it to him, the judge.
I'll do real quick.
One more. Chris.
Thanks. Chris Nelson, no relation with the Nelson report. Are you envisioning that this is a standalone bill at this point that absolutely has to be passed before anything else happens? Or is there a possibility that you would accept promises with Congress ongoing in negotiations and let some of these other things come up? If it looks like they're going in the right direction.
Well, basically, the standalone's got to pass first, but I am open to listening to other points of view, so long as they're real, not just vague, false promises. If someone comes up with an idea which is pretty much locked down, written in stone, and there's no escaping, then I'm open to it. I'm always open to new ideas, but I'm also not going to be a sucker here. I believe that we got to pass trade adjustment assistance. Thanks very much.
Thank you for this. Good luck with the stimulus package.